Okay, it's day 41, and one of the things that, if you follow the series, you know I enjoy is following great reporters. Luke Rosiak's done some great stuff, and I think that Brian Ross is probably my favorite reporter, going all the way back to when he was at Cleveland, reporting on the bombings, the cell phone bombings in Cleveland with the Teamsters in Cleveland. That's how far back I go with Brian Ross. I mean, he was reporting in Cleveland when I don't know. I seem to remember the late 70s, but or even in the 60s. I remember 60 to 65, Brian Ross doing those stories. Maybe I'm wrong. When Carl Stokes was mayor, he can't be that old. But if you don't know Brian Ross, check him out. But this is a story he did about this International Security Board, which is made up of members of international nuclear security experts, and they're proliferation experts. You know, you can see Brent Scowcroft here, and these are world famous people who know all about proliferation of uranium and other fissile materials. Well, a Clinton donor gets on this board, and I'll play a little bit of Brian's report.
But in 2011, the Clinton State Department also added this man, Fernando, a wealthy Chicago commodities broker with no known connection to the national security world.
I'd like to invite to the stage Fernando.
What he was known for before and after his appointment was raising and giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to Democratic campaigns and as much as $250,000 to the Clinton Foundation.
ABC News, you have just a second to talk here.
When we approached Fernando at the 2012 Democratic Convention...
How did you get appointed to that board? Can you talk about that?
How do you know my name, out of curiosity?
He became upset, and we were threatened with arrest.
Yeah,
This department will be arrested.
I'll be arrested for asking questions of this man?
But now the new set of State Department emails, obtained after a lawsuit brought by Citizens United, reveals the role of Clinton Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills in appointing the big donor, with a senior career official using the shorthand S, a common reference to Secretary Clinton. The true answer is simply that S staff, Cheryl Mills, added him. Raj was not on the list sent to S. He was added at their insistence.
I don't know who will be giving money.
At her confirmation hearing, Clinton vowed foundation donors would not receive special treatment.
That will not influence, it will not be in the atmosphere.
The new Clinton emails also show that when ABC began asking questions about the appointment of Fernando in 2011, top Clinton aide Cheryl Mills asked the press officer to stall for 24 hours. The very next day, Fernando submitted his resignation from the prestigious board.
The Clinton campaign declined to comment on our story, and the State Department said it's not unusual for the Secretary's Chief of Staff to play a role. As for Fernando, he has continued to raise big dollars for the Clinton campaign and has given more than $1 million to the Clinton Foundation. In fact, he'll be one of her superdelegates at next month's convention, Amy.
And Brian, this morning there is another new report about Hillary's emails on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, linking them to some potentially sensitive messages about drone strikes overseas.
That's right. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the ongoing FBI investigation is focusing on these messages sent by American diplomats in Pakistan about pending drone attacks, which ended up on her personal email server. But the journal also says the messages were vaguely worded and did not use the terms CIA or drone. ABC News has not been able to independently confirm the journal's report, Amy.
All right, Brian Ross, thank you so much.
So there is just a good example of the emails. We know the emails talked about drone strikes in Pakistan. We know they talked about nuclear proliferation. So, you know, it just seems to me that they had to come from somewhere, come from the State Department. They had to come from either the CIA or foreign intelligence agencies, and then somehow make their way to New York to the Clinton Foundation for those to be on her server. So again, I think just by connecting those simple dots, you can show that the Awans down here with the Pakistan connection, ISI connection in Congress, might likely be a source. Now this is an interesting article done by Vice, interviewing these Pakistan ISI drug lords in Yorkshire, England, and they said, well, how do you do this when drug dealing is what's called haram? Haram, like Boko Haram, means forbidden in Islam. And then halal is the opposite, meaning it's permissible. So halal meat, you can eat the halal meat. Halal meat is not just pork, but it's other meats as well. So if you really go down here and look at the folks that are involved, you can see that there's state sponsorship, and this has nothing. These guys are not living the lives of devout Muslims going to church and praying 5 times, or going to the mosque praying 5 times a day. They're partying. They're with the girls. They're living it up, sort of like Imran with the $3,000 a night kind of stripper habit. So the question becomes, well, how do these guys launder their money? How do they get the money processed? And what I would like to look at, and I've said this before, but it's the subject of this talks a little bit about, sorry about that, it was an ad that came up, I apologize. Bitcoin. Now it used to be Hawala was used, but now there is actually a halal stamped or approved Bitcoin, and they're actually encouraging, this reminds me of the CIA anthropologists, the reason why you can't have a currency based, in Islam you have to have a currency based on actual values, so it has to be backed by something. The money has to be a representation of something of worth, not just something based on debt. So this is the old CIA anthropologist saying, hey, move your money to Bitcoin and get out of this other market, which is this Hawala, excuse me. Now Hawala works this way. You have a money trader at one end, like in Pakistan, near the opium fields in Sialkot. You have another one in Chicago. And the Hawaladar is A and Hawaladar B, and they basically every once in a while, one trades locally. Let's say this is the Chicago end, let's say this is the Pakistani rupee end, but they basically trade locally, and then every once in a while they settle accounts. This reminds me of the old money changers back in Florence, where they were trading money for different shippers, spreading risk and so forth. So sorry about that. So that's really what I think Raj Fernando is. I mean, not Raj Fernando per se, him personally, but a person like Raj Fernando would be a perfect person like that, to have a Raj Fernando type of guy in Chicago doing these trade credits back and forth. And you settle occasionally through different investments. So Raj Fernando is an investment advisor. Every once in a while, this guy will buy a convenience store for $250,000, and that can be processed that way. So investment advisors, look at it. For investment advisors in the United States that are clearing halal, and that's the other end of this financial transaction. It's a rather very simple idea, but it's something that I thought, this is an obvious, potential halal type exchange happening here. And it's going to be moving to Bitcoin, which is going to make it more difficult with cryptocurrency and so forth. But again, I believe that there is a backdoor by the FBI. I know people are going to get mad when I say this, for Bitcoin, that it actually can be tracked. So anyway, that's this morning's kind of a think piece this morning. Sorry about that, but we'll move on. The Awan's trial got moved to January the 8th, so I had to start the day with a think piece.